Good morning, everyone. I am really thrilled that you all could join us for this session, and I'm really honored to be working with Jen and Ross at the Media Factory. This is the first of the Media Factory digital programming technical assistance that we are co-hosting. The Vermont Arts Council, as you probably know, is the state arts agency. We've been around for 50 or so years, and we help support arts and arts organizations and the creative sector throughout the state. We were thrilled this year to receive funding from the state legislature, $1.15 million, to invest in building the digital capacity of cultural nonprofits around the state. And this is really a reflection of the really incredible and innovative work that cultural organizations did in Vermont on a dime when everything shut down. And the state values that work and really wanted to make an investment so that that kind of digital programming can continue. So just wanted to make sure that you knew about kind of the full breadth of what we're doing with this digital capacity funding. As you probably know, in addition to the free technical assistance about digital programming that we're offering with Media Factory, we're also in the middle of a great series with Inclusive Arts Vermont about digital accessibility. Those are free sessions that are running monthly through July. And I think Kat's here from Inclusive Arts Vermont. So you can check out those workshops. There will be more workshops rolled out with the Vermont Small Business Development Center that's focused on website analytics and social media marketing. So look for those to be rolled out in the next few weeks. This free technical assistance, all of it's free, all of it's open to anyone from cultural organizations in Vermont. All of them are being recorded and will be available online afterwards. Parallel to this technical assistance, let's see, before I go farther, I'm just going to plop the link to the main page where you can see all the different technical assistance options for organizations. Parallel to the technical assistance are direct grants, and that's the bulk of the funding that the legislature allocated for digital capacity. Our grant program is now open. The deadline is April 20th. The link I just put in the chat, that webpage has everything I think you could possibly want to know about that grant program, application preview, grant guidelines, and a link to set up a meeting with me. If you have any questions about that grant program, I am here to answer those questions. So that is that's my little orientation to digital capacity as a whole. Before, I think I got ahead of myself, because before we go much further, I just want to make sure you know that we have captioning. We have a live captioner here for this session from White Coat Captioning. So if you're interested in viewing the captions, click on the closed captions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then click on the show subtitles option. I also, before we get any farther, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you today, and likely all of those of you who are calling in, from the traditional and unsurrendered territory of the Abenaki people in the state we now call Vermont. Please join us in acknowledging their history and ancestors, their enduring presence, and their future generations that live and gather here. Thank you. I think that I have covered everything I intended to cover, so I'm going to turn it over to the main show, Jen and Ross. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was excellent. Great way to get us started. We are now going to start the show. So this is Production Elements. We're here at the Media Factory. The Media Factory is a community media space in Burlington, Vermont, and we can tell you a little bit more about that. We are going to ask that everyone comment in the chat as we go along. And I'm going to show the screen right now. So we've got some slides, we've got some videos, we're going to have some demos. It's going to be a really great 2 hours of just a big broad strokes of what media production can be and how it might make sense for you. We're going to be talking mostly about the technical decisions, not the sort of programmatic decisions. I think that's where you're all the experts. So you're going to get this information and figure out how you can use it for your own organizations. Right now, I'm going to share my screen.
While Jen's doing that, I can introduce myself. My name is Ross Ransom. I'm the community education coordinator here at the Media Factory. You know, this is a workshop that I think is kind of fun. It takes a lot of elements from a lot of our other workshops. You know, it's really an excellent primer, I think, to just jumping into making video. So we'll talk about things from, you know, camera operation to audio to lighting to composition to pre-production planning with storyboards. This one's kind of fun. So, if we go, Jen had mentioned the chat that we have. It'd be great to know what brings some folks in, you know, with some of those project areas that we'll be covering, to know if there's, you know, something that we can impart or share that, you know, would really help you out specifically. Feel free to throw some things into the chat. You know, it's there for questions, but also comments. Let us know what brings you in today. So that's always really helpful for both Jen and myself. Our next slide here is going to be community media. Just a little bit about who we are as an organization, because throughout the state of Vermont and throughout the country, there are so many centers like us. We are known as access media organizations or community media centers, public access centers, channels. We are a place that tries to democratize media, make it accessible for people, really allow folks to tell their story. Whether it be something that's, you know, a hobbyist level of video production that you're interested in, or you really have a message that you want to get out there, share something with your community. We make access to the television broadcast channels free, and to allow people to create content, we offer the tools, the production equipment, the cameras, the microphones, but also the education. So you know how to use these tools. Centers throughout the state of Vermont and across the country, we are affiliated loosely in the grand sense that we share the same mission. Please, check out. We're in Burlington, Vermont, in the south end of Burlington. But please, if you're coming in from outside of that general area, Chittenden County, Vermont, please check into the Vermont Access Network or the Alliance for Community Media. There are centers like us, trying to make it easy, accessible, affordable, and therefore very possible for people to create, share, and contribute to, their local media landscape. It's a lot of fun, for sure. So cool. A little bit about us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ross. I'm currently failing at the chat, but I think I got vermontaccess.net in there for you. That's where you can go to find your community media center in your region. There's so many great organizations doing this kind of work. And so I'm going to share a little bit what we're doing. As I mentioned before, this is our big picture and focused on production elements, the things you need to know to plan and produce a video production. And we're not focusing on live streaming here. We have another workshop coming up in a few weeks. That's live streaming. That is currently sold out, all filled up, but we will be recording that as well. So today we're mostly focused on the equipment you need, the camera operation, tools, thinking about how you use composition, lighting, and audio, sort of the main building blocks of any production. And I guess, one thing I just want to share, as Ross was introducing himself, we've been working together in the education department here at the Media Factory for several years, and we just love doing this work in particular and introducing people to media and learning how you can use it best for your own goals. So this is totally up our alley. This is one of our favorite things to do, and we're just really excited to be here sharing this with you today.
Jen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there was a request in the chat for you, if it's possible to increase your volume.
Oh, just me? I can do that. Is that better? Thanks. Sorry about that. I'm having a little microphone droopiness over here. I'm going to try and adjust the mic stand a bit, and I will make sure to be speaking really clearly. Thank you so much for letting me know. I really appreciate that. It would be a shame to not be able to hear me for 2 hours. So just wrapping that up, what I said, I think you can see this from the agenda. We are addressing the main building blocks of video production today, and it's one of our favorite things to do. So I am going to pass the mic to Ross, and we're going to start talking about camera. And I'm actually going to stop the slide share in a sec so that we can begin to.
We can take a look at the next slide.
We'll take one look at a slide, and then we're going to get to see some real live demo stuff.
This is a fun workshop because we're bouncing around a lot. Slides, live demo, Jen, Ross. It's gonna be fun. So here we are with our camera operation. It's, you know, so fundamental to make sure that you know, you're starting at this point. Everything is going to hinge from this, right? You know, in a lot of ways, audio is more important than video. Getting really crisp, clean audio, super key. But if you're using a camcorder, if you're using a mobile device, it's all going to then feed into your camera in terms of what you're producing content with. So it's a really important place to start. Typically you want to start with, you know, how do you keep your tools stable? And then we'll go into some of the recording, you know, things to keep in mind before you hit record. So setup and then you know, some dialing in. You know, certainly, you know, there's several, you know, programs, shows, movies that we can think about that have really, you know, utilized the kind of shaky cam, everything from The Office to Blair Witch, you know, all of those pieces of content really utilize shaky camera work, but it needs to, everything you're doing in video, I would suggest you do it as deliberately as possible. So oftentimes, you know, having a really clear, steady shot. For instance, if you take a look at any of our images here, just in Zoom, our cameras are stable. The borders are not shifting. If they were shifting, it would create a different experience for the viewer. And so that's something we always want to keep in mind is what is it going to look like in the end? So I can demo a setup here that's going to start off with our tripod here. This is going to be a fun one. I'm going to pivot my camera just so you can see this tripod a little bit. Get a little behind the scenes look for a moment. So here I have a camcorder. You know, there's certain cameras you can use, everything from a phone to a tablet to a DSLR camera to, you know, a camcorder. Camcorders are great. I'm a big fan of them because they are, you know, a combination of a camera and an audio recorder. Certain cameras out there don't typically focus on both aspects. Camcorders do that very well and allow us to you know, hook up some microphones via XLR cables. Anyways, this is my demo today. I'm going to start off with stability. I'm using this tripod. There's several different types of tripods that you can get. Some are taller than others. Some have a wider base. Some, you know, are built into certain things like dollies, so you can employ some movement. There are some rigs that are handheld gimbal stabilizer things. I always just like starting with a simple, basic tripod. 3 legs, the ability to pan and tilt manually, lock it into different directions. So this tripod that I've got here, one thing, you may have seen a tripod before, very common. One thing to keep in mind is that if you are, using a tripod, a video tripod, you really want to make sure it has this handle here. This will allow you to get your pans and your tilts. You know, oftentimes you do lock in your camera for a lot of shots, but if you want to employ movement, it's a lot easier than trying to move the thing up top. One other key thing for using a tripod that you want to keep in mind is balance and level. you know, if you look at the bottom of my image here, my screen image, it does appear to be level, like with the horizon, with the floor that I'm on. Typically, when you put this on a tripod, you're adjusting the 3 legs individually. It's very possible that you can get one off to the side. Some tripods have the ability for you to use what's called a floating head, where you just move the upper mechanism to then level and balance. But just keeping in mind, adjusting the legs so that, you know, you probably have the camera eye height with your subject, whether that be a person or an object or a landscape, you know, and then balancing the camera, finding what's a comfortable pan tilt, attaching. There are certain ways that you can attach cameras to tripods, camcorders, DSLR cameras. A lot of these devices are specifically made to be on a tripod. There's going to be an element like a screw underneath that you can use to mount your camera to the tripod. I mentioned earlier that you can use phones, tablets. Here we have an iPad. There's really no way to screw this onto a tripod. So what we can do is pop these things into, mounts. So once you do that, some mounts are cool for mobile devices like this, you know, allows freedom of movement here, more stability with your hand holding. There's also sometimes some slots at the top where you can put on things like microphones or lights. So really handy tool to use some of these mounts here. Once you do pop one of those in, again, there's going to be that threaded screw hole on the bottom, so you can start to put that onto a tripod. Once you're here on the tripod, ready to go, there's a couple of things. There's an acronym I like to keep in mind. I call it, well, I didn't come up with this, a good friend did. It's FACE: focus, audio, color, exposure. Of course, you know, there's so many more things to focus on, you know, there's depending on the complexity of your production, but for just the visual element, this is and audio, this is a really good place to start. Focus, right? We want to be able to clearly see, you know, what we're recording. That's really important. Audio, of course, we want to be able to hear it. Color and exposure, you know, very important. Sometimes you might recognize, having seen something, you know, a video looks really red or looks really cool, looks really not cool as in like cold colors like blue, you know, whereas like hot colors are red. You might recognize that something looks like you know, really washed out with color. That kind of stuff stands out, and it's usually due to the amount of the color of the lighting. We'll get into that a little bit. We do want to cover that, you know, getting that right color correction is really important. And exposure is then linked to lighting as well. It's how well we can see. You know, you may recognize that sometimes things are really dark, it's hard to see. Sometimes things are really bright. And like, if you actually look, you know, if you look above my head, you know, we start to get some washed out colors here, or the light is too bright. So focus, audio, color, and exposure. And really briefly, I'm going to switch this over. You might see here on this monitor, our good friend, Ed the head. So in order to get this into Zoom, I've had to do a down conversion. So Ed's going to look a little pixelated and also backwards mirrored here. But he'll still be able to help us demo what we want to do with face. Audio we'll get to a little bit later, but focus, very key. If I zoom in on Ed here, you can see that Ed's in focus. This is Ed out of focus. Right, so on a base level, we want to make sure that our subject is in focus. Easy to do on a tablet, phone. Typically what you'll do is just tap the screen on the subject that you're recording, and the device will autofocus there. On a camcorder, DSLR camera, the best way to do this is a trick called critical focusing. Now, if I were to zoom all the way out, okay, actually, first let's zoom all the way in. We can see that Ed's not in focus if I zoom all the way in. But if I zoom out enough, you really wouldn't be able to tell. I know it's a little pixelated, but certainly, he's not as out of focus as before. He looks like he's in focus, for what it's worth. If you're going to watch this on a small screen, it might not be really clear to the viewer that it's out of focus. If you're going to do this on a large screen, it'll be really clear. The trick here is critical focusing. You zoom all the way in, you focus, and then now so long as the distance between the camera and the subject doesn't change, that your subject will remain in focus. For color, we'll get to this when we talk about lighting, but for exposure, just so that people know, most of the time adding light is not going to be a bad thing. If I were to increase the gain, you can see that the problem with too much light is sometimes things get overblown and too light. You can see the shirt kind of washes out and becomes flat. So finding the right balance of light is really key. Now we can see more of the detail of the shirt. So in terms of camera operation, those are some of the things that you're going to want to keep in mind, right before you're about to hit the record button on your device.
One thing we should just acknowledge is that it's pretty obvious that, if you're looking at this on Zoom, you might not see all these nuances of focus. Hopefully the recording of this will make it clear to you. But also, I hope you get the general concept, right? That you want to go in really close on your subject, get that focus sharp, and then you can pull back again. If it doesn't look quite right here, that's understandable. Zoom is a really tough medium for showing those kinds of details. All right, so I'm going to share the screen again, and we are going to check out some new concepts. So once we've gotten our camera all set up, we really want to think about composition. And so, it's hard to believe, but Ross and I made some decisions today when we set up our cameras. Everything from choosing the rooms we were in, to the locations within the rooms, to the angle of the laptop in relation to the space we're in. Those were all decisions we made to have a composed image. And I'd say in most cases, when we're talking about composition and all of this today, the first thing, the basic idea is that you're aiming for something that's natural, or that is visually engaging, but also not distracting from the subject. So there's all these ways you can break the rules, but first you kind of have to know what they are to work within them. So we're going to focus on those kinds of rules right now. And so the first thing you do is you set up your space. As I said, we've made these decisions. We've, Ross is in the studio. He's got some advantages there that, there's studio lighting. I've had to do a little bit of extra to set up my space. You're going to want to do that every time you're setting up a space. We're going to talk more about audio later, but it's probably a pretty good idea when you're choosing your space to think about that as well. I actually put up signs on either side of this classroom to let people know I'm in here today so they don't disturb me. Thinking about where you can, your location is sort of the first part of composition. But then everything else is starting to happen inside the camera. And we're really talking about framing and shots, which are their own vocabulary. And what's great is if you know how to do this, then you actually are able to, do. Oh, is my microphone still low? I really don't understand. I apologize. Is that any better?
That is much better.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Well, I said a lot of great stuff. You can imagine it was brilliant and perfect. However, I can also say that we'll just talk about this by watching a video. We're going to show you framing and shots a language that you can learn how to do, which will also be something other people know. So if you're working with a production company, you are going to be able to tell them what you want. If you're working as a team with other people on your staff, if you all know the general shot types, you'll be able to make decisions together and be able to sort of have a general idea that's the same. So what we're going to do right now is actually watch a little video, and then we will learn some more. And I apologize again for the audio. I'm really sorry that that was so low. Okay, so now we're going to move over here, and I'm going to play this video. And please let me know if this is too low.
Hi, I'm Jen Ferrara, and today we're talking about framing and shots. Think of shot types as a general vocabulary for storytelling. So let's get started. First of all, there's the medium shot. This is the standard shot for interviews on the street, for documentaries, and it focuses on the person, not the environment. If you want to get more detailed and show more emotion, move in for a close-up, just the head and shoulders of your character. And if you want to look at a specific detail of a person or object, that's when you move in for an extreme close-up. Sometimes you want to show more of the person or space that they're in. A medium wide shot gives the subject room to move around and even do a magic trick. A wide shot lets you see their whole body more or less. It lets you know that I'm wearing striped socks and you can see a little bit more of my environment. Speaking of environment, let's go outside. An establishing shot, or an extreme wide shot, can set the location of a scene. Camera movements are also helpful here. A pan is a side-to-side movement, which is useful when your subject is wider than your frame. A tilt is an up and down movement and can help you see something that is too tall to fit in your frame. Sometimes you want to see from the perspective of your subject. That's when you can do an over-the-shoulder shot with the person still in the frame, or what's known as a POV, where the camera actually becomes the person. If you want to show an imbalance of power, a low-angle shot can show someone who's very powerful. A high-angle shot makes your character look smaller, possibly intimidated or afraid. If you're filming someone who's speaking off camera, like in an interview, make sure to give them talking room. Think of it like a speech bubble from a comic strip. The rule of thirds helps you place your subject in the frame. The eyes of your subject should always be in the top third. 3 last things. Use a tripod as much as possible. Make a list of your shots before you go film them. And don't be afraid to take a retake. Now go out there and make a video.
Awesome. Right on. That video has been around in our repertoire here for teaching for a long time. Jen made that many years ago. It's still just as awesome as it was then. It covers so much. There are so many types of shots, so many different ways they can link. When you link shots, shot after shot, we know that as we call that sequencing. Sequencing, typically, you might start off with one of those wide shots that was demonstrated there in the video, an establishing shot, for instance, and then move in closer, tell the audience where you are, and then start to get into the details of the action. But like anything in filmmaking, oftentimes those rules are kind of meant to be broken. I always think that one of the best things you can do to learn this kind of stuff is to just learn the vocabulary, which is why a video like that is so helpful. And then as you're consuming stuff in your life, television, movies, web videos, whatever, just keep a lookout, try to start defining it, try to pay attention to the order that shots are. Remember what you like, if something felt really impactful or something felt really weird and uncomfortable, jarring, to jump from one type of shot to the other. Keeping that kind of stuff in mind, it's really helpful for informing, how you might put together your own work. So we do have a couple of slides here that also just show some of these compositions right here. Establishing shot, wide shot. One thing that you can see kind of as a faint overlay over every single one of these images is a tic-tac-toe board, or dividing the frame into thirds. We called it in the video the rule of thirds. And as Jen explained in the video, keeping eye lines in the upper thirds, putting people off to the side and leaving room to talk across the frame.
Yeah, in this slide,
perhaps.
You can see here we have what they call nose room. So that's another thing you can call it, nose room, talking space. Either way, you're still seeing the same idea that there's sort of, you could imagine if you were drawing this as a cartoon, that the person's words would be, coming out in a speech bubble, giving them room to speak. This is also, can I just say, this is also, it's still a thing people do, but it's definitely documentary style. The idea of this is that you are talking off camera to somebody over here, where if you are looking at this as the way people are doing things now with YouTube, I'm just going to stop the share for a second, sort of show you this. So, when you're looking at the camera, YouTube videos and the way people have started doing stuff, it's like this, right? This is the way we do Zoom. We talk to the camera. And in that case, you can still think about your placement, right? You don't have to be centered exactly in the middle of the room. I'm trying to show off our cute little logo here. I'm also trying to not be, sort of so intense by being right in the middle, but I'm not talking off camera. Now, if I was being interviewed by someone in this position, I'd want to be here talking there, and they would be sitting there talking to me. So just understand there's kind of a language that keeps evolving and changing based on sort of what's current. And social media has been really driving a lot of what people expect to see in video. So I have just a quick question as we're going. If anyone wants to share in the chat, were any of those shot ideas new to you? Was there any that you had not heard of before? That would just be cool to know. So go ahead and just respond in the chat if you do have one that you'd like to share.
Additionally, as we're looking at the chat here, seeing if some folks are sharing some, I do want to mention that there are lots of shot types, and it's really easy to focus on things like the medium shot. We're really used to seeing things in a medium shot. We almost like go through our actual lives with our eyes as a camera in the medium shot in a way. Variety is really, really nice, depending on what you're doing, right? Sometimes too much variety distracts from the message. But at other times, having variety, one thing that's really interesting is an exercise that I like to do. Honestly, it's been a while, but mute whatever I'm watching and just pay attention to how often it cuts between shots. It's really surprising how quickly shots change, and they're typically not the same angle back to back, view necessarily. So it's, we're going to talk about storyboarding coming up, and a lot of that really plays into, trying to figure out how it's going to look there in the end. So passing it back to you, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah, so we have a few more slides here regarding composition, and we're kind of repeating ourselves a little bit because some of these messages are just really worth knowing. That rule of thirds is going to just make all of your photographs and all of your video look great. So even when you're taking like a photo for Instagram, if you're thinking about where the eye line is, suddenly you have a much more dynamic image. this idea of using props is really good if you're working with something more limited. So we were showing you, a nearly $3,000 camera kit. And if you're going to be working more with laptops and iPads, you might not have all of that technology at your hands, which is fine. You can do what we have. Like I have a little prop that is holding my laptop up at more or less eye height. That is, I think the little stand was $35. I have a box that I'm using to hold up a light. I'm setting things up in my space with whatever I have. So remember, you can do that. And then the other thing we talked about at the very beginning of this was about changing your angle, rearranging your space. If you have something head on, it can look amazing. If you're Wes Anderson, if you are the rest of us, it might look very static and stiff, especially if you're right up against a wall. So here I have like a little bit of distance between myself and the wall. So there's a little bit of depth. I'm also at a slight angle, so you can see the depth again, sort of making the background a little bit more dynamic and a little less flat. The other thing, as we're talking about all this, is really to think about how there's composition, right? And then there's your format. And the rules are going to be the same, but they're just that grid is going to change depending on what you're filming for. So that's a really important decision. And it's something that actually here we had to really work on and learn. We had all these professional video folks who are used to that traditional 16:9 that I'm sharing in the slide. And I am here doing education and outreach and trying to get stuff on Instagram and getting these really wide videos where I'm like, I can't use this because I'm gonna have to pick one of the two people in the shot and I'm gonna have to cut somebody out. So, we had to sort of figure out how can we do video that is gonna look great on TV, and how are we gonna do video that works on social? And sometimes it's two different videos. Sometimes you can film the same thing. So if you're trying to use one piece of footage for multiple things, you can see this image here. This is a really great example. There's one subject, which makes it a lot easier than when there's two. But each one of these shots can be set up for a slightly different angle. In general, it's easy to go from horizontal to square or vertical to square. It's pretty hard to go from horizontal to vertical. You can see the traditional 16:9 horizontal video really wouldn't work well if it was vertical, and vice versa. That is just something to think about if you're deciding on using video for social media and various different outputs. But either way, you're still looking at that rule of thirds. It's just a slightly different grid. And lastly, on this subject, here I am. I swear you're not going to see much more of me in the footage. This is an example of how the same video can look totally different on different phones. So, I recorded this video. I tried really hard. This was early in me figuring out how to use titles, and this was an Instagram story or a reel. It's a reel, and this is what it looks like on an Android phone and on an iPhone. And you can see that some of the text is cut off differently. There's more visual space entirely on the iPhone than on the Android phone. And in both cases, you can't really see the comment or the post text, which is kind of an issue. But at least on the Android one, you can see that there is some. Well, on the iPhone, you can't even see it. This is tough. This is where our trial and error comes into play, and doing things a few times, and also just don't beat yourself up about it. You'll figure it out. And so all of that leads us to storyboarding, how to get there. So I'm going to pass the mic back to Ross for this.
So we mentioned storyboarding earlier as a way to plan what you're going to be producing. There's something we're going to look at also next called shot lists. Both storyboards and shot lists are really, really useful tools. Sometimes folks just work a little differently in how they conceptualize what they want to shoot. But the purpose of both of these tools is to recognize that the more you plan, the more specific you can envision the end result, the less guesswork you have along the way, and the easier time you have then assembling what you're doing. So typically a storyboard is a shot-by-shot representation of your video. Doesn't need to be detailed. I use stick figures, you know. Here we have, we can see in this example here on the screen, it's a 3-shot storyboard. Close-up shot, a presenter. Typically you want to identify, this is where the language comes in play. Storyboards are also a really helpful tool if you're working with a team. Knowing the language, you know, you can maybe think about how you want something to look, but without the vocabulary that's common, it's tough to convey that to the people you might be working with. So for a shot here, you know, you want to define, is it a close-up shot, establishing shot? You know, there's going to, of course, always be, you know, a little bit of room for interpretation on how this stuff is presented from a storyboard if you're handing this off to somebody to shoot. But, you know, that's where the drawing comes in handy too, to further define what you're looking for. So this first one, close-up shot of presenter. The audio, you know, this is really helpful if there's a script. You know, sometimes you have to forego adding certain elements to a storyboard or a shot list just because of, you know, the production that you're going to be doing. This one clearly is scripted, so we can take a look at this. Audio is here. The nice thing about adding the audio there is that you know, if it's based on a script, when you're going to cut to the next shot. Again, you know, just another way to conceptualize or plan how you're going to go about your production. It's really easy when you get to a place to forget shots that you wanted to do, to just this is a really helpful tool for sure. So the second shot here in the storyboard sheet, it looks like it's a close-up shot of the action, right? So we started off, you know, so that way the person introducing themselves wasn't, you know, somebody we didn't see. We wanted to be able to, you know who this person was. We started there, then we move in to another shot. Certainly, that person could have just demonstrated, or, you know, described how to tie their shoes. I think this is how to, yeah, it looks like they're teaching us how to tie their shoes. So they could have just described it, but keeping in mind, you know, we have the ability to cut, relocate the camera, start shooting there. Really, really helpful. Otherwise, you might forget to record the shoe tying when you get to the site. Storyboards, you know, typically shot, audio, image illustration. We do have some templates, as you can see here. You know, you can find them online. You can hand draw them. Yeah. The next slide is going to show us shot lists. And shot lists are another way to go about it. I kind of like to use them hand in hand, although sometimes I find myself enjoying or liking the shot list a little bit more. The shot list here, you know, the stuff at the top, production, director, location, date, scene, you know, this, you know, just defining, you know, who you are, where you are, what you're doing, what these shots are for. You can see some similar vocabulary to a storyboard: shot size, angle, description, notes. One thing I like to use shot lists for is to think about B-roll, a term that we haven't really brought up yet in this. And B-roll versus A-roll, you know, if you were to think about primary footage of an interview, you know, but somebody's describing the house they grew up in, and then while you continue to hear them describe the house, you start seeing shots of the house. That's going to be the B-roll, the extra shots, the complementary, supplementary shots that are there to provide more visual interest, break up monotony, and also further explain visually, you know, what you're hearing about. So shots of the house. Do we just want an exterior shot? Here, there's not really a script that we know about, right? You know, if we're interviewing somebody, we don't know necessarily what they're going to say. A shot list is really helpful so we don't forget to get an establishing shot, maybe a pan across the front facade, you know, a tilt up the ivy climbing up the side of it, you know, a POV shot walking up to the front door. Shot lists are really helpful for B-roll. So that's why using them in tandem with a storyboard can create, you know, certainly a lot of information going into a production shoot. So, little bit of a pivot here, coming from shot lists and storyboards. I honestly can't tell you how helpful shot lists are. I forget things all the time when I get to a production, and having a list there, it's just so helpful. And especially for things like B-roll, a lot of those shots, are not more than 10, 15, 20 seconds really, right? So, you can really just have quite the list to go over. So switching it up and going forward, talking about lighting a little bit. We've got some tools we want to talk about, some strategies for lighting. But really, while we produced a lot of this slide deck, a lot of these examples ourselves, almost everything in this workshop, nobody explains this better than our old friend Griffin here. So I'm going to do a little screen share of this video. And this video is called 5 Things You Need to Know About Lights. It's a primer video created by a YouTuber called Indie Mogul. It was made for their local PBS channel. And it really does a great job, talking about the 5 key things to think about when it comes to lighting. Let me do a quick screen share here, and we can give this a roll.
Indie Mogul.
This week on Indie News, 5 things you need to know about light. And why would you ever want a video camera that can only shoot black and white? Hey Indie Mogulers, Griffin here. I've been asked by my local PBS station to produce a quick primer on lighting, and I figured you might want to be the first to check it out. So here it is, 5 things you need to know about light. 1, you need it for good video. Cameras rely on light to capture a clean image. It's the biggest difference between grainy amateur video and professional quality productions. 2, it doesn't have to be expensive. Sunlight is much more powerful than indoor light, and it's free. Video almost always looks better outside. And if you're shooting indoors, grab as much light as you can. Try clamp lights or work lights from a hardware store. Or you can build a powerful DIY light like I did. 3, light comes in different color temperatures. Incandescent bulbs at 2700 Kelvin have a yellow tint, whereas sunlight at 6500 Kelvin is much bluer. That's why it looks weird to mix the 2 light sources in the same scene. It's also why you set white balance on your camera to adjust to the color of the light. When you buy light bulbs, you can often choose a color temperature. I like 5000 Kelvin because it's similar to midday sun. 4, light can be modified to suit your needs. Hard light produces distinct shadows, but you can diffuse it for a softer, more flattering look. You can also use a reflective surface to bounce light where you need it. Barn doors help shape light, and colored gels are a handy filmmaking tool. Finally, you should know about 3-point lighting, the ideal way to light a subject. Your key light does most of the work, and a second, less powerful light fills in the shadows. Finally, add a backlight to illuminate the edges and increase dimension. There you have it, 5 things you now know about light. Those are just the basics, so let me know in the comments what other lighting questions you have. Last week I mentioned...
All right, so that's Griffin here telling us about lighting. Now, one thing that's really interesting with lighting is that it's all about space. It's easy enough to demonstrate composition. Even audio is not going to be too complicated to demonstrate over a tool like Zoom. Lighting is a little trickier. It's very much defined for a specific shot at a time, and it's about space. It's tough to really showcase in an environment like this, which is why it's really handy to have a video like Griffin's that we can go into and dissect. As much as he clearly at the end there defines 3-point lighting, it's so much more it's very specifically tuned. It's like almost every time I go into a place to shoot, I have to rethink about the lighting. There's certain like basic concepts, you know, like you want your key light to be the primary light. Of course, you want to illuminate your subject. But where is that key light going to be? And if that's there, you know, how does that fit in next to the window? So it's always something that I'm building out in every new location that I'm going to. But certainly it's easy when you understand the strategy. Starting off with the 3-point lighting there is really helpful. We've got the key light, which is our primary light, right? Imagine you're in a dark room. You've got no light. You need one light at least, right? Outside, that's really easy. The key light's the sun. It's really hard to beat that one. So you're not really going to get a brighter light than that. Although certainly you might be able to do something, you know, on a cloudy day or early morning, dusk. Once you start to have a camera light coming in from one place, you know, for instance, if I were to cast a light across my face only, the other half would be in shadow. We can take a look at Griffin's video. To further demonstrate this. Here's the 3-point lighting setup. Key light. You can see now on Griffin's left side of their face, on what we're seeing on the right side, you know, we start to see more shadows on the cheek, on the side of the forehead. And also it looks, it doesn't look really well balanced. So while one light is necessary, because as what was demonstrated earlier, low light versus powerful light, really light is so important. You know, it all stems back to photography, right? Greek, Latin, I don't know, Greek, drawing with light. So we need light. Once we've got our light in there, if it looks like this, we need to balance it. Earlier in the chat, there was a question, you know, how many cameras would you suggest for a certain production? And really, every additional camera, every additional light is just going to start to change your production. It's going to it's going to add a little bit more until it starts to take away. So you need one light, just like you need one camera. I'm in a room right now with 18 lights, so I'm in a television studio. But that's a little overkill at a certain point. So as we can see, the one light here casts the shadow, then we need to fill it in, balance it out, right? But now the trick here is while Griffin looks good, the background looks really flat. He kind of disappears into the background. There's not a lot of dimension, 3-dimension, right? The border of his figure here, his profile, or his head here, it just, you know, it feels dull. So then we add in a third light, the backlight, to, you know, provide some distinction between the edge of Griffin and then what's going to become the background. Oftentimes the backlight's known as the halo light or the hair light, because it'll shine on the back of the head. So, you know, any additional lighting, what if we wanted to put in a fourth light? You know, maybe it might be cool to illuminate the wall a little bit, you know, I don't know, this is kind of good with 3 lights, but if I were to put a fourth one in, maybe on the wall a little bit, so that way, like maybe this image, this painting, if it has some meaning, you know, would have some illumination too. Going back through this video for a couple more things. Of course, easier to demonstrate. Back when we were talking about face, focus, audio, color, and exposure for the camera operations section, we talked about color temperature. Griffin touches upon that in this video. This would have been a warm color temperature right here. A tabby cat for sure, but like, you know, I'm assuming maybe this is a white wall and it looks pretty yellow. Overall, we'd call this a warm, a hot color temperature. Now, sometimes you might see something that's really cool. This is probably the same cat, but now this cat is very blue. the shingling on the house, the frame here of the window, probably white, off-white, but certainly not blue like this. This is going to be a low or a cool color temperature. That's all about lighting. Next time you go to a hardware store, pick up a light bulb, you'll probably notice, or you could notice that it's going to have listed on there the color temperature. Different light bulbs produce light at different temperatures. You also might recognize, what we call the what's that time of day when everything looks really cool with the sunlight? I forgot, the golden hour.
Golden
right?
hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the same source of light, but as it cuts through the atmosphere different, the color temperature of that light's going to change. So, certain types of light bulbs that emit different color temperature light, combining them looks really weird. Phones, tablets, they do an automatic color temperature adjustment. Camcorders, DSLRs, you need to dial that in. It's worth looking up whatever your device is, if you're using a DSLR or a camcorder to record, and looking up how to do color balance. It's different for each of the devices. It's never complicated because it's something that you need to do no matter what location you're in. Even if you're outside, different times of the day would require different light color temperature changes. That said, once you adjust that, you can, within reason and pretty closely, record footage throughout different color temperatures. If they're all properly exposed for the color white, color temperature is also known as white balance, then, when you're piecing those together side by side, they might look really consistent. So that's always really cool. A couple other things to just talk about with lighting. Scrubbing through this video, this is why lighting is really particular to a certain space. As demonstrated here, he's really illuminating this area, but if you start to look towards the ground, towards the window, it's not really lit. And that's something to keep in mind. If you're going to employ camera movement throughout your, whatever you're recording, it's really easy to sit somebody in a chair, get 3 good lights on them, hit record. It's very confined. It's very structured. If you're going to start employing movement of people on screen, objects moving through the screen, your camera movement, you want to think about what the lighting is going to look like throughout. Stages are really great because we know that they're made for people to move around on. Smaller spaces like rooms inside of buildings, offices, those are a little tougher sometimes. Just because, as you can see here, these lights only go so far. Lastly, I do want to share, and I wonder if he's got a really good example for it. He does talk about some cool modifying. We don't necessarily need to go into that right now. But I have another slide here for lighting. And it's about windows. Well, we got this lighting basic slide. We can bring this one up. So just to recap here a little bit, lighting, we need it. Sunlight's always brightest. So it's nice to complement things like that, especially if you're using sunlight as your key light and you have supplementary light. Oftentimes some of these LED panels that like the industry and for professional and consumer lights, they're moving towards LEDs. They're not really that hot. They last longer. They can be adjusted for color temperature is a really big one. So if you are shooting outside, you need to add some more light. As mentioned in that video, you could bounce light back into the back onto the subject from your key or your fill using like a bounce board. You can also use foam core, aluminum foil. But if you're doing that with sunlight, it's definitely really key and helpful to white balance to the sun. You want to match whatever your key is with any lights that you're bringing in. Backlight's a big one, right? You may recognize, having seen in the past, somebody giving a presentation maybe, and they're standing in front of a projector screen and they're basically a silhouette. can't really see their details, their features. Throw some light on that person, or just move them away from that light coming in. Light coming from behind a subject and into the camera is going to close its lens, or its iris. It's going to shut itself down so as to it's going to close itself off as to not start to overexpose, as we saw earlier with Ed. Too much light coming into the camera, bouncing off the white shirt that Ed was wearing. He lost some of the detail in the fabric. You know, keep your light coming basically towards the person, but not into the camera. And then that slide did mention bounce light with a card to add more light, and 3-point lighting is best. To further demonstrate that, we do have one more slide here. Here's a really one we might be used to now these days with Zoom being so prevalent here. Window behind the computer, right? So not behind our subject, our person here, you know, shining through. A lamp to fill in, maybe a lamp for backlight too. We want to keep the brightest light in front of us. There's a side view of that scene. And then you can always use, you can see that as the light bounces, it does lessen in intensity, but it can still provide some light on our subject here. Lighting's super fun. It definitely takes a little bit of time to dial in, but it's not something that I would shirk, because it certainly in the end can create a really, really rich composition and really intriguing video, especially if you're using devices that work well with depth of field, such as what are they called? DSLR cameras. Really balancing your light with understanding what your focus depths are going to look like can create some really intriguing compositions.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. I would love to just really quickly show folks what I have set up here, because I think it's, we keep kind of going back and forth between what is a sort of practical requirement versus what is, you know, what you're going to be able to do. And here, let me see if I'm, yeah. So what I've got here is a setup that is, you know, a little bit different than Ross. I'm not in the studio, I'm in a classroom, and I have light above me, but I don't have any light in front of me. So the above light is sort of functioning as my key light, just because it's illuminating the entire space. However, I decided I wanted to have a little bit of extra fill light. Otherwise I was going to be completely, having sort of creepy over the top lighting. So I have this little light here that you can sort of see as I turn it on and up. I'm gonna turn it off so I can show it to you directly. This is a really great example. You know, Ross was talking about, you can use kind of any light. You can use any light in your house. You can use any light in your office. Fluorescents are kind of the worst. Almost everything's LEDs now. And one of the really cool things about a lot of LED lights is you can change the color temperature. Even, I know I have a couple with a phone app where you can actually change the colors, you know, to the full spectrum. This little guy is a pretty common thing we have around here. These little ICANN lights. They're great because it's, you know, super small and portable, super lightweight, and it has a control so you can make it as bright as you want it to be. You can also change the color temperature from blue to really yellow and everything in between. And so what I've been doing here is actually not aiming it directly at myself because it's too bright, but aiming it slightly off, just enough to fill in a little bit and create a fill light so you can see a little more of my face. So just as a practical example of this, you can do this with any kind of light. I would say just take a look around your environment and see what you have. And actually, this is the time for that. We are going to take a quickie break and we have a little challenge for you. So we want you to take 3 minutes, look around your space and find a good location that has good lighting, maybe interesting composition, or just a space that you can identify. And we want you to take a photo if you can. You could take a mental photo, or if you have a phone camera or any other kind of camera around, take a quick picture. You could take a selfie and frame yourself compositionally. You could take a shot of any object, but just take a minute to look and try to compose a shot with what we've talked to you about. And if you wish to share after we regroup, I think you can probably just share it in the chat. Yeah, so we will be reconvening in just a few minutes, let's say right around 11:10. And look forward to hearing how that went for you. All right, we are back. So did anyone take a photo If you did, I would love to hear how it went. And then we're going to have another thing to think about. Oh, that's great. So the rule of thirds really came in handy, and leaving talk space. I love it. Yeah, I find the rule of thirds is now just ingrained in my brain. So I'm always thinking about that as I'm lining up a shot. And it's just a really good practice to have that. And as we said earlier, you know, there is a lot of times people break the rules on purpose. But you'll look, even when people are deliberately putting someone low, they might have them in the bottom third. So they're still working with that rule of thirds. They're just playing with it. Oh, that's very cool. The composition looked really dynamic and less expected in terms of a selfie. I like that. Yeah, you know, you want something, you know, I think we often think about this in terms of some of the first areas of productions about interviewing and trying to do things that are going to be about the person, not the procedures. So you aren't totally aware of all the stuff that goes into the composition. Hopefully, you're really focused on the subject. And then, of course, you play with it in all sorts of different ways. What we're going to do now is the thing that we actually had a few issues with at the beginning. We're going to talk about audio. So I'm going to share my screen again. And we actually, it's interesting. The first half of our session, we covered production, composition, and lighting. The second half, we cover audio, which tells you just how important audio is, that it's half of our time. So this is what we're going to do for the audio section. We have a listening exercise we're going to do. We're going to talk about room noise. It's a concept. It's a very important thing to know about. We're going to explore different kinds of microphones. And then we're just going to have some tips and tricks to share with you. I can tell you that regarding questions about pricing, we can try and answer some of them in the chat. There's a really wide range with all of these things: cameras, tripods, microphones, lights. There's the low end and the high end, and there's almost always something you can find that fits your budget, or you know, if you can partner with your community media center to do a project, that's also a great solution. So you can use some nice professional gear that you don't have to purchase. So the first thing we're gonna do is have a little listening exercise. I'm going to pass the mic back to Ross.
This is one of the things that I always like to do before any. I do this during what I call you call like the site visit, pre-production site visit. You would do this, for instance, when you are filming in a place that's unusual to you, that you're not very familiar with. You'd probably want to go there beforehand. You'd want to choose maybe the same day of the week, same time of year, same time of day. You want to be as close to being in this place wherever you're recording. You know, you want to get an understanding of what it's going to be like when you're there, for everything that we talked about before, what the lighting is like, you know, where are your outlets, how far away do you have to park. These things are really good to know when you're shooting, you know, on location, off-site, places you're not familiar with. But it's also really important to figure out, you know, why you're there for audio too. There's a question that came up earlier in the chat, and it was asking about filming in noisy places. Now, if you're going to go to a site that, I'm going to pick a school cafeteria. It's probably pretty loud. Probably a lot of clanging, conversations, a lot going on there. So do you want to go there after hours? If you're going to be recording there, during the lunch rush? Probably not. You want to be able to be as close to understanding what it's going to be like when you're there as possible. And one of the things I like to do is this listening exercise. I close my eyes, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, however long it takes. I close my eyes so I can really just focus on the sound. And I take note of every single sound that I hear. Now, of course, in the cafeteria example, we're probably going to hear people talking. But in other spaces, you might partly pick up on things that are going to influence your audio mix that you might not have expected. I'm just listening to my space right now and hearing some of the things. But I want everybody to just take a moment here. Close your eyes. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to shut down my camera and microphone. 30 seconds. I've got a clock here on the wall. We'll come back, throw into the chat, some of the things that you hear. And we'll take a look at what people can hear. Write everything. So starting now, 30 seconds, 3, 2, 1. All right. So seeing some things happen in the chat here. I'm seeing some things that people are hearing. I'm going to think that we can categorize these sounds into 2 different buckets. One bucket is going to be stuff we can't change and stuff we can change. Somebody just wrote dog. You can change that. If you have a dog that's barking in the space, maybe if it's offsite, maybe somebody could watch the dog for the day. Maybe you could put the dog in a room, let the dog outside in a fenced in yard to have some fun away from the recording. Somebody else mentioned trucks downshifting, cars driving by. That sounds like you're near a road that has traffic. Can you appeal to the town to shut down the road for the day so you can get a production that has no sound influence? Maybe you can. Maybe you can't. So that's going to be something that's going to influence which microphone you choose for your project there. Heating unit. That reminds me, I'm in this room right now. Typically for a recording, I'd turn off the AC. I like having the airflow in here. I'm leaving it on, but I hear it. Zoom does a good job of cutting through the noise, which is sounds that we don't necessarily want in our mix for these online meeting sessions. So I don't feel like it's that much of a bother to keep the air on. It's kind of nice. If I was recording an interview and I just had, a microphone that was not being processed to be as part of, a group meeting like Zoom software does, then, I'd probably turn the air off. Sometimes people have mentioned things like they hear a television, people walking around, that's kind of like the hey, quiet on the set kind of thing. We're going to pick that stuff up and that's going to live forever, right? It's going to be in your recording. So things you can change, things you can't change. If you can change things, let's see what we can do. Let's see how we can change things. Do we hear most of the traffic outside because the window's open? If we close the window, maybe we can minimize some of that sound. Audio is so fun. It starts all the way back here. So some of the things we can't change, that's where our decisions on our microphones are going to come into play. In the past, some things that can't be changed. Yep. Refrigerator humming, fan running. Yep. I've heard, heating, like pipes cracking from heat and, water. A lot of these structural things sometimes are hard to change. Major transportation things, if you are right next to a train station, if you're recording above a bowling alley and below another bowling alley, it's going to be really hard to maybe shut some of that stuff down. So we do what we can. Microphones play major into this. So once we've figured out what some of that stuff is, there's like a 3-part test I always give myself for this. But so we did the listening exercise. I'm going to pass it over to Jin for what is that echo?
Hi, I have a speedy slide deck. Echo is a big issue. If you have ever filmed in a gymnasium, or Ross's example earlier of the cafeteria, you understand that large, empty or roomy spaces, especially ones that don't have any cushioning, are going to be very echoey. On the flip side, an incredibly quiet space is unsurprisingly a library, where you have walls and walls of paper that is dampening the sound, and often carpeting as well, and lots of narrower, smaller spaces. So what you want to do if you find yourself in a situation where you have to record in a large space is try to make it a smaller space. You do that from a variety of ways. We're going to talk more specifically about the mics you use, but in terms of controlling your environment, there's so much to this. It's like this whole piece, where folks ask about, I'm just going to riff on this, folks ask about the cost of cameras and mics and tripods, and that's very important. You need to know that for your budget. But so many of the decisions you need to make are really about the space you're in and controlling that environment. That's going to make all those other things work better. So if you can, use pillows. You can put blankets around you. If you've ever seen any conversations about podcasting, podcasters talk all the time about recording their audio in a closet with clothing or inside bed sheets, which is easy to do when you're not using video as well. If you're using video, you want to think about the space, trying to figure out if you can sort of block the sound and focus mostly on what's in front of your sound. That's what you want to be using. You're thinking of like sort of a ricochet effect, or like, imagine that the words coming out, they are coming out in waves. What are they hitting on the other side? So if you can put a chair or a shelf, or you can change the angle of the person speaking and the camera so that it's not directly picking up background noise of people running and walking behind you. These are all sort of choices that you can make to control the sound in the environment, as well as choosing the proper microphones. We talked just about this, and I think it's great you all took a minute to listen to the sounds. I think it's just amazing what we don't notice until we pause. But so many of the environmental noises are going to be things you can't control. So if you can't get rid of the noise, you really want to have the microphone as close as you can to the audio source, whatever the noise is that you're picking up. And then you're making decisions about how the sound is being recorded. So I'm actually using a microphone that's just off camera, but is right here pointed directly at me. And we had a couple of issues, but it was really more with the mic stand because it wasn't keeping the microphone up. But now it's pointed right at my mouth, and it's only, a few inches away from me. If we did this, use the same microphone, but put it across the room, it wouldn't even be doing anything really. So you want that proximity, and then you want to understand what kind of microphone you're using. And what's really cool is that we have all these great microphones that we can share with you. And I'm going to pass this over to Ross. I'm going to share this slide, and then Ross can share a little bit more with some of the actual mics we have here.
Oh, no worries. You can drop the slideshow for this one. I'd rather talk to folks for a moment because I'm going to post into the chat the 3 questions that I ask myself whenever I'm thinking about a production. So the first one we touched upon with that listening exercise. What sound do I not want to record? Things we can change, we just take care of. Things we can't change are going to influence which microphone we use. What sound do I want to record? That's just as important. Some microphones are good about getting around certain tricky situations, but will it really pick up what you need? And then lastly, how visible do I want my microphone to be? Doesn't look like I have a microphone here, just because like Jen, I've got a handheld microphone on a stand just off camera. But speaking about a handheld microphone, you've seen people do this. And on game shows and interviews on the street, that's cool, totally fine. And they sound great. Narrative films, you don't really see Frodo Baggins walking around with a handheld microphone, right? So we need to figure out how visible, how appropriate would it be for my microphone to be visible. So 3 different types of microphones that I want to take a look at with y'all today are going to be the handheld microphone, the shotgun microphone, and the lavalier microphone. So they all have their benefits, they all have their uses, and what's good for what. So one thing I'd like to showcase is, well, there's another type of microphone. We typically call it, it would be like a boundary microphone. Sometimes it's just known as an internal microphone. For instance, our phones, tablets, phones, they have a built-in microphone. People have often done video recordings with their phones and tablets. And it's very common that people find the same thing when it comes to the audio. Visually, looks fine. And they're just getting better and better. The audio, consistently awful, often. It's gonna have a lot of echo. People are gonna sound really distant. It's gonna sound tinny. It's gonna be hard to really focus on the clarity of like the thing you actually wanna record. That's because it's really a failsafe. Phones, tablets, camcorders, even some DSLR camera models have internal microphones. And they're really just there in case you lose your microphones on the way to a shoot. You have something as a backup, which is great because sometimes it's really hard to put together a whole production again because you forgot to record audio or were missing a microphone. So having that internal microphone is great for something like that. Most of the time it's awful. So that's why we want to really be conscious about these 3 questions we're asking to find the right microphone. I will say, in the right circumstances, the internal microphone of a phone can actually be pretty good. If you're recording something that's like oh, now I got a light on. If you're recording something that's far away, it's probably not going to sound very good on the phone. But if you've ever made a phone call with your phone, it sounds pretty good. As Jen was mentioning, that's really about the proximity, right? This type of microphone's good up close. Of course, you'd want to temper your audio levels. You wouldn't want to necessarily talk too loudly, or else it'll start really muffled. We don't want that. So understanding the microphone is really key. In a pinch, totally a fine mic, so long as you're talking as if you would into it as a phone, which I think they are too. So which microphones going forward? We got the 3 here: the handheld, the shotgun, the lavalier. I do want to preface this by saying, because we're going into Zoom, there's going to be some compression. Zoom's going to be doing some stuff, trying to make these all sound level, which is amazing. It's a total feat that they've been able to pull off. However, it does make it a little more tricky to demonstrate exactly the fine details differences between these microphones. We'll get the general scope. We'll see how visible they are in the frame. We'll get an idea of what they pick up and what they don't pick up. In terms of different models, I have 2 handheld microphones here. They might sound the same, but they'll operate like handheld microphones, wherein they won't operate like lavalier microphones. So that's how we're going to learn the differences here. General rule of thumb, you know, to a certain point, the more expensive a microphone, the higher quality it is. It really is really true. Microphones are really sensitive tools. They can be made really inexpensively. The super cheap stuff, it's good in a pinch. It's good on a real budget. The thing about audio is that really nice audio does require a little bit of an investment, and audio is super important. So I recommend, sure, they make 8K cameras now, right? $50,000 red cameras. That's prohibitively expensive for most people. I wouldn't skimp on the microphones. Don't go that expensive for the microphones. What I'm saying is you don't need to get the newest, greatest camera if you can take some of that and really invest in good audio equipment. That's going to be more important, I think, in the end. So
if I can jump in, Ross, real fast. Yeah. I think one of the things that's kind of a secret, or not secret, but a thing about a cheap microphone is that it'll work pretty well for a while. And one of the places where things really fall apart is on the cables and the connections. So that's the place where it's going to work okay for a little while. If you get a bargain basement mic, it's not necessarily going to last, which is awful when you're out in the field and you're preparing for something and suddenly the microphone that worked fine for like 3 months is no longer working. The cables really matter. And that's the same deal also if you're buying connectors, additional cables. Try to get the ones that cost a little more, because the value is incredible and how long they last and how well they work for you.
Very true. Speaking of which, some cables just out of reach. So got 3 microphones here that we can demonstrate. I'm going to start with the handheld, and the reason being I've been using this the whole time. Oftentimes on a Zoom call or something like this, I'll plop in some headphones. I'll have, like iPhone microphone just hanging near my mouth. But for this, just like Jen, I've employed an actual, so my audio is going to change now, right? So bear with me. I've employed this microphone on a stand. It's here. It's a handheld microphone, but it's on a stand. That's always really cool. And then it's just out of frame. I've increased the sensitivity of the microphone just enough so, it doesn't need to be this close. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap through these different microphones and feed them into Zoom. So starting with this handheld microphone, I'm just going to pick it up, use the one I've been using. This is actually a really cool one. Oh, I can see that was probably too loud. So this is a cool one. It actually is a USB microphone. It's made by iRig. They also have lightning cable connectors. And I don't know if they make stuff for Android, but certainly for Apple products, the iRig stuff is pretty good. So one thing I like about this microphone is this LED light that you're noticing. I'm adjusting. I'm just trying to make sure that it sounds okay for everybody. If at any point, you can't hear me at all, please let me know in the chat, because that's going to be crucial for this section. In addition to those 3 questions, there's 2 things you want to keep in mind when you're choosing what microphone and figuring out the quality of it. So one is you want to be able to witness, you want to be able to measure how sensitive it is, and if you're getting stuff that's like too hot. If I were to get really close to this and scream into the microphone, I will not do that for those of you wearing headphones, but you'd probably hear something that sounds like really muffled. It might be really distorted. We call that peaking. It's overblown. It's too hot. Those are some of the terms. None of that's good. It's going to sound really bad. We don't want that. So you want to be able to measure. If you look at this microphone, I can increase the dial. Here it's kind of turning red at certain points, so that's definitely going to be a little loud. And then if I bring it way down here, now what I was saying is you probably can't hear me at that point. So this is really key. oftentimes mixers will have some sort of monitor level, like a VU meter or a decibel meter. Camcorders the same, DSLR cameras the same. Mobile devices don't really have meters. That's why a microphone like this that has this LED indicator is really helpful. So that's important. You want to make sure you're getting enough audio into the microphone. And then secondly, you also want to make sure that what you're getting is actually good stuff, right? Like if I had a bad cable and I was just balancing static and I had like really good static levels, that's not helpful, right? So you want to be able to know what you're hearing too, what you're recording. So headphones, super key. I would never record audio without headphones ever, without being able to actively listen, unless you can't. Tablets, phones often don't let you monitor the audio simultaneously. That's why at least a microphone like this for a mobile device is nice, because the LED indicator is 1/2 of the things that you should have. But in that case, test recordings are great. Record in 10 seconds under the same conditions you would do the real recording. Trust it. Don't record for too long. Maybe check it out here and there. So yeah. Okay. So now moving in, we got our 3 things. What sound do I not want to record? What sound do I want to record? How visible do I want my microphone to be? Can I check my meters? Can I listen in at the same time? We won't come back to those. However, so 3 questions. What do I want to record? Handheld microphones are great for this situation right here. This one has the ability to up its sensitivity a little bit, so I could mount it and put it off screen a little bit. Typically, though, a handheld microphone can be held. You might hear this coming in through the microphone, right? It's just, you might hear that. So touch is something that, it makes sound, travels through solid objects, travels through the air even lightly. Touch doesn't travel through the air. Sorry, sound travels through the air. But touch does travel through, solid. So handheld microphones typically are designed to be held. Some are better than others. You just want to know how good your microphone is at being held. I think this one's pretty good, so that's why I'm holding it right now. It means that it can also be passed between people. It's a really common microphone. People know how to use it. You can hand this over to somebody and they know, not to get too close, not to keep it too far. Most people are familiar with this. You can also help them out in a pinch really quickly. Hey, bring that a little closer to your mouth. Pull that away a little bit, those all work. So this is one, however, that you're noticing at this point is very visible. So is that something that's appropriate for what you're making? On the street interviews, totally fine. Mounted on a podium that somebody walks up to and starts speaking at? Sure. Yeah, that's great. Narrative films, maybe not so much. Formal interviews that have long, answers from somebody, maybe it's not the best. Maybe there's a better tool. One thing that's great about this microphone is that it will pick up. It's not designed necessarily for one person. I could share this with somebody, right? You probably notice that as I bring this away from my mouth or change the direction of where it is, you probably hear me less. But at least if I was sharing this with somebody or, asking questions, it's good for picking up 1 to 2 people. It's like, I'd like to think of it like as a, 4-foot space microphone. I don't know. It's probably real audio techs would really hate that description, but it's good for a couple of people in a line, passes off really easily, but it's very visible. One thing it doesn't do is pick up a lot of sound beyond, just the general area. So that's why it might be good in a noisy place. That's why on the street interviews sometimes use this type of microphone. There might be a microphone out there that's easier to move around and reposition. But this one won't pick up everybody in a big crowd. It really will focus in on, the person that is holding it, maybe the person next to them too. So it doesn't pick up too much sound. It's easy to move around. A lot of people know how to use it. Very standard, good microphone. So now, is it considered a directional mic? Well, Yes and no. Often they're omnidirectional microphones, but yes, they do. You know, Stephen, if you don't mind, I do have a diagram coming up that will help out with that question. I will come back to that question. Thank you. Cool. So we're gonna switch it up though. Test. Am I here? Can you hear me? Cool. Looks like it. This is another microphone here. Handheld microphone, just as a test. I'm gonna switch it over now to our shotgun microphone. Hi. Okay, this is a shotgun microphone. I got to turn it down a little bit on my mixer. This microphone, while it looks like the handheld microphone, is not good for holding in your hand. It's really going to pick up the sound as I touch it a lot more, which is why this is a microphone that's often better mounted. Sometimes people call it a boom mic because you might put it into a boom hole. You'll notice that a boom hole holder, this boom here, it's got some rubber bands there for shock treatment to kind of help out with some of the impact that can happen as this microphone picks up on a lot of sound that is through touch. But the thing about this shotgun microphone is that it's very directional. It's very cool. It works picking up in a conical shape going outwards. Directed immediately at the person who is talking or people who are talking, it works pretty well. As soon as you start to shift either one of them away from each other, they work. It's not so great. It really does want to be directed at the person and kind of in line with the way that they're speaking. So not perpendicular like this. But one thing about this is that it throws itself really well. There are different lengths of shotgun microphones. The longer the shotgun microphone, the further away it'll pick up sound. This is a really good microphone. It's typically, honestly, put on things like camcorders. Because it picks up directly in front of itself, camcorders will often have a shotgun microphone just mounted on there. So that way anything that the camera looks at is being recorded. Shotgun microphones are really cool too, because you can hook them up to XLR cables. It's a 25-foot cable here, but we can go up to 200 feet, which means that we could have a camera far away and run it up to, a mic stand on a table on the floor, one that's a little taller, and pick up something from further away. We can run a microphone up there. Because it's good at picking up at a distance, it can be off camera too, which is why the boom pole is sometimes really a great use of this microphone. Unlike the handheld microphone, the shotgun microphone is really good for wider spaces. If you are filming a concert performance or a live performance of anything, and you need to pick up a bunch of people, bring the shotgun a little further away, boost it a little bit. That'll work pretty well, and it'll be out of your frame. One thing, this isn't used for noisy environments because it picks up, it just keeps going for a while. Some of these have a really far range, so they're not great for really noisy environments, because the handheld would kind of just work in the immediate area. The shotgun would pick up things behind, your subject talking.
I think a shotgun's really handy when you are doing an event where you want to get the sound of lots of things happening, and they're a little bit unpredictable. I think of something like moving through a farmer's market or some kind of event where you're in a space and there's all the sounds around you that you want. But there's times when you're in that same sort of space and you want to really just hear from a person close to you. And in that case, I think Ross has got the next mic is a perfect example for that.
Test. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, can you hear me now? Hello?
Not yet. It's low. We can kind of hear you, but you're very low.
Hello, hello, test, 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 hello?
I'd keep going a little louder.
Hi, okay, well, I have to get this, I guess, right here. That's not ideal. Can I be heard right now? Hello, hello, can you hear me? Hello, test, test. Test, test, hello, hello, hello?
Yeah, it's super low compared to the others.
That's not ideal. This microphone's so good. All right, technical difficulties. I gotta grab another one. Be right back.
Okay, so I'll talk about this mic a little bit. I can set you up with what you're about to see. So we are going to, our next example is a lavalier mic, and that one's really great for when you want to have one person on camera and you have enough time to set them up. As you can see, there's some testing that might need to be done. Those are very fine cables, so that's one you have to really treat with a lot of care, because the cable itself can be, an issue if you're not careful, especially in less expensive lavaliers. I feel like they last for maybe 3 recordings. But you can see that in a situation like that, you're going to have a microphone very close on the person's body. You're going to be aware of a lot of different sound issues there. So I mentioned in the chat that you want to watch out for jewelry, so like earrings that make noise or a necklace that makes noise. Also just a shirt. I don't know if you can hear this even just on my stick mic here, but if you have something that rustles, that's going to be really noticeable with, in particular, a lavalier mic, but really with any mic, you have to think about that.
And I should be able to demonstrate this microphone now. Should be able to hear me. So really cool microphone here. Really good at vocals. Didn't hear what Jen said. I'll try to summarize some of the main points I want to impart now that you can hear this. It's really good for voice. It works really well on one person. It is visible, although it's pretty inconspicuous. I could even, because I'm wearing a button down, really wrap this cable through the shirt, and only this little bit would be super visible. As Jin, I think, just mentioned, you do want to protect it though from getting hit. You can hear that kind of stuff. My hair was hitting it. If I had any jewelry on, another layer of clothing, you do want to protect this. It's really good for one person though. If I was being interviewed, if I was with somebody else, you'd hear them, but not enough for it to be a really quality recording. You'd want to give them their own microphone or account for them as a microphone, needing to be recorded. But one of the nice things about this is I can now be hands-free, and unlike the other microphones, it will follow me, right? I can even look all the way over here, right? And it's recording just the same. The relative distance is not changing, but because it does require attaching to somebody and some routing, it's not as quick and easy to pivot as a shotgun microphone or to hand off like a handheld microphone. Provides a really rich recording, but at the same time, it's not as versatile, but it's really good. I hope the sound's really good. It's such a good type of microphone for single person recordings. One thing I do also want to keep in mind, I mentioned that some microphones are really visible in the frame, some are not. And that's really just about what's appropriate for your piece. I said that you wouldn't really have somebody in a narrative piece holding a handheld microphone. But depending on what you're pulling off, if they were wearing a lav, it's just a really good way to get them wired up. And if you need some more movement as well, all of these microphones can be hooked up to wireless microphone types. Bluetooth is certainly an option. I would recommend going not with Bluetooth, just because there can be some sort of interference. The distance quality depreciates really quickly. I would go with something that's got a hertz frequency instead. But any of these microphones can be hooked up in a wireless form. So hopefully this lavalier microphone sounds good. I'm just going to keep it on as I bring up our next slides here. Just to demonstrate a couple things. Each type of microphone has a directional pattern. This is a shotgun microphone. This is a bird's eye view of a shotgun microphone pointed towards the 0 degrees. As I mentioned, the shotgun microphone picks up in a cone directly ahead of itself. So as you can see straight ahead, all of these frequencies are mostly being picked up pretty far away distance-wise. As you start to move to the side, it does, taper off. Although you can, assume you got a 120 degree pickup radius here, or pickup angle pretty decently. It does pick up a little bit behind itself. Each microphone is going to be different. Certain microphone types will follow a general pattern that is going to be similar from microphone to microphone of that type, but the specific frequency, quality, some of these maps will change. It's cool kind of knowing what these do, what these look like. It can help you figure out what some of your microphones are. But the best way to really get into knowing how a microphone works is just to use it as often as you can and get comfortable with it. Here, this is a slide that's going to be available through the recording and on the website after this event. So it's just a recap of everything that we just talked about for shotgun, lavalier, handheld mics, and we didn't necessarily talk about studio mics. It's just another way that you can get a rich sound that's similar to a lavalier mic quality sound, but it's not necessarily attached to somebody. They're usually really expensive, and they're usually quite they're in a place like a studio. They don't really move so much. I'm going to pass this over to you, Jen, just for these.
That sounds great. And I will just throw out there at the end there, we had, we also mentioned wireless systems, which is really its whole entire thing. And someone had asked earlier about recording audio with a DSLR, and we're not going specifically into DSLR recording, just except to say that an external recording device for audio is highly recommended. And so that's what those H4Ns are recommended for in particular. This is just a recap. So these are the really simple things that you can do no matter what type of microphone you have. You just want to have it as close as possible to your voice or whatever you're recording. You want to, and surprisingly, those earbuds with the microphone connected, we used those through most of COVID when we were working from home all the time and found they worked quite well. So don't assume that a simple device you already have isn't good. It's certainly better than no mic at all. And as long as you get really close and try to control the noise around you, you can get a decent recording. And then again, the idea of controlling your environment as much as you can, putting those blankets and pillows near you to dampen the sound is really going to help. And as we said, about half of our presentation was on audio, and there's more we could have discussed. This is a huge subject, and it's a really valuable thing to know and to be mindful of as you're doing any sort of video production. And then we have a couple more slides for you. This is kind of the end of our presentation, and we're going to just wanted to share this. Is going to be shared. All of these are links to some of our resources, the storyboard sheets and shot list sheets that we shared before. We also have a production checklist that is just a really cool tool for thinking about all the things you might need to do in planning a production. We also have some recommended resources. It's a series of links that we've put together over the last few years. And then one last thing that we just want to remind you of is anything you're doing, you really want to be making some considerations. We're not going to tell you how to do your project, but these are good questions for you to really think about before you get started. You want to know how the beginning and the ending of your video are going to be. You have to go in strong and end strong. So consider that. Think of that first shot, that last shot, what you want to show. And all of these questions are really good ones to share with a trusted source, a person who can give you a gut check and look at your work in addition to you. So before you go out and share anything out in the world, show it to someone else, go through these sort of questions and think critically about what you're doing. It's going to make your project much stronger. And I think you'll feel much more confident sharing it if you kind of go through an internal review of what you've made along the way. So these are sort of things you want to think about beforehand, but also again, once you've finished a piece. We have several other workshops coming up. So there is more to learn with us. We are going to have an editing essentials workshop, which is definitely one of my favorites, which takes everything you know about video and then helps you think about what to do once you've done the recordings and how to put it together to tell the best story. We are also going to be talking about going live with what you've got. So that's going to be starting with the basics of live streaming and also thinking about some ways that you can add on to that and just the entire workflow, which is a rather complicated one to go through. And then we're going to be doing a tech session and encourage all of you to consider going to that if you have specific questions for us. I know we've filled up our one-on-one consulting time for the spring. We are going to be offering some more this summer. That won't be coming out until probably June. But we'll be doing some one-on-ones in July. And we're happy to answer questions. You can email us at learn@mediafactory.org. If it's a simple question, we'll do our best to answer it. And we certainly encourage you to also check out the rest of our workshops. We offer online and in-person workshops here at the Media Factory year-round, and you can see what we're doing, and you can join up as a member if you're in our viewing service area and have access to all of our equipment. And if you are, if you liked today, we'd love it if you told people. So you could share on social media. Our profile is BTV Media Factory at Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So yeah, this was wonderful. It was great to be here with y'all. I'm going to stop the recording, and we have a couple of minutes here where we could answer some questions if anyone has a question. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, everybody.